Welcome into the PantherExtra podcast. Ethan Petrik, Jim Nelson from the Waterloo-Cedar Falls Courier, bringing the show to you guys today. And I just want to get started with kind of debriefing from that Weber State matchup last Saturday. It certainly felt like a game where UNI was going to get tested in the deficiencies that it showed against Iowa State. And Coach Farley said it was going to be a game where they're going to be able to see a lot of growth, and that's what I said in my preview, and I don't think we saw a lot of growth out of the Panthers. Jim, you were at that game. I was at the Cy-Hawk game. I've since watched the game on TV, but it's different to be in the arena. Share what your key takeaways were from that loss, that 34-17 loss to Weber State.
I think the big takeaway is it was a ball game until there was about 7:50 left in the game, and UNI's muff punt. The muff punt was the tilt of the game total in Weber State. It was it energized Weber State. They only got a field goal out of it, went up by 10, but you could almost see it was like the dome was deflating. That's what and UNI's fight almost deflated, because I think in the next possession Theo threw another pick, and and that led to a touchdown. It was just like wow, but. Very much, I thought when they got that on that punt, when they were getting ready to receive that punt, and they were going to get the ball and they were going to get it around their 35 or 40-yard line and go, okay, here is the pivotal drive. What are they going to come up with? Are they going to drive the field and tie this game up, and then maybe we're going to see some overtime or something, or a thrilling end? And then obviously we've documented the muff punt, and it just, and the person involved would say it was a poor decision. Coach Farley said it was a poor decision, And you hate to put the loss on one guy. That was not the one thing. That was just the one thing that stands out is the muff punt. When that muff punt occurred, UNI was very much in that game against the top 10 team and had a chance to drive the field. They had moved the ball a little bit. They had shot themselves in the foot a couple times. They had a chance to really, maybe make this a real interesting game. And then when that happened, it felt like the dome deflated at that point, because you knew that there was not much time left, and and Idaho State was probably going to get some points out of it. So that was it. The other thing too is there was a lot of good things. There were some bad things. Theo Day, some of the decisions are, some of the mistakes he's making is, I think they're still trying to figure out that mix of that new offensive line and trying to figure out. We might see a different combination this week of starters.
Well, that's been the thing that's interested me the most is we heard after the Iowa State game right away on Saturday, sitting in the bowels of Jack Trice, that there were going to be some personnel changes. And then watching the Weber State game, I don't know if there were any personnel changes. So was wondering if maybe they're waiting till the open date to maybe readdress the depth chart a little bit. You add Tristan Roper back, but he was a starter that was penciled in and just missed the Iowa State game. So you're not really making a personnel change there and putting him back in. You're just getting a guy back from injury at that point. So you're looking at it as like, what were there personnel changes, or were you just trying to were you confident in those guys and maybe they proved again that maybe they shouldn't be the ones you're putting your trust in? And that was what Coach Farley said on Monday about Theo, because I asked him, I don't think we've seen him struggle for a 2-game stretch or just over any stretch period, and he's really struggling right now. And that's what Coach Farley said is like, oh yeah, we're not going to sugarcoat it with him. He's not playing up to his standard. He's not playing up to our standard. He's not playing up to the media or the fans' standard for him either. And a lot of that has to do with the pressure in his face. And I've talked about these 2 sacks to start the second half a number of times, and I talked about it in the story I wrote following Monday. I asked Coach Farley about those sacks. He didn't place a very big emphasis on those, but the reason why I'm kind of keying in on those is because the first half, you kind of come out of that and feel like, well, UNI should have had a 10-point lead at the very least, and Weber State's lucky to have this game tied. And then you get the interception. So Weber State, it gets the momentum right away in the second half. And then there's those 2 sacks and those stalled 2 drives at midfield where you're thinking, hey, both of those drives very realistically could have ended in the end zone, and you could have had the lead right back. And instead you're looking at a 10-point deficit after a muffed punt. So I think when you're looking at the struggles on offense, it really comes down to that offensive line. And I don't know if that is a personnel issue or what kind of issue that is. What are the issues that you're seeing that are maybe plaguing the offensive line? Is it like a communication issue? Because it does look like they're failing to pick up some of these blitzes that teams are bringing against them.
Well, first off, they faced the top 5 FBS defense right off the bat, who brings some unique look and when they blitz, and I think Weber State saw that on film and crafted a perfect blueprint to do some of the same things, and and UNI didn't learn enough or weren't prepared enough to see those same things come in. And so that's one thing, is they saw a really elite defense, and then another team just mimicked and brought some of that same stuff, and they didn't quite get to where they needed to be. 10 sacks in 2 games that's not going to help your offense at all. The other thing is too, and I know nothing about offensive line play very well. I'm not an expert or nothing. I think probably what they're looking at is, do we have the right guys in the right spots? Maybe they moved Jared Penning to left tackle. Maybe he's a better right. Maybe they've discovered he's a better right guard, and that's what he played, or left guard, whatever. He played alongside his brother at one time, didn't he? So maybe he's a better left guard, and can we find somebody who can play left tackle? And now maybe that answers to something that now we got a road grader, at left guard that can get out and pull, and take pride in that and being the best left guard he can be. But I don't know. I'm throwing darts at the dartboard here. I don't know the personnel, as well as you could, as Coach Rick Nelson knows. I don't know that personnel. Our Coach Farley, I don't know their personnel as well as they do, and they know their strengths and they know their weaknesses. And is it a matter of just coaching them up and getting them to the level they need them to be, so Theo can get back there and start slinging that ball around?
Yeah, and so relying on your experience a little bit, what is going on inside of the walls of the Unidome right now at 0-2? What are the conversations that are being had?
Well, I think right now I don't think they're panicked, but they know there's probably a bigger sense of urgency right now that they need to go put together a good performance in this game on Saturday against Idaho State on the road. I think there's probably a bigger sense of urgency than they've had all year. They've had urgency, I'm sure, but is there panic? No, they still got 9 games left in front of them. They still can rectify this and do some things, despite the challenging schedule they got. They got this Idaho State, and then they have their bye week, I believe.
Yep.
So if you can go put in a strong performance here, go set some things right on the road, get a win there, and then have a bye week where you can really get down the nitty gritty and really fix some things, or not maybe so much fix things, maybe mold them into better shape. I think that is what they want to do. So I think there's a little bit bigger sense of urgency right now to, okay, hey, what is it going to take for us to put together a really strong performance, go get a win on the road, and then let's come back, and we're not going to have to reinvent the wheel, but we got to do some things. We got to mold that clay a little stronger and make it give it maybe a little bit better foundation, so we can be the best UNI football team when it comes to October.
Yeah, and Coach Farley, a big proponent of the strategic open date. He gets a bit of a strategic one this year. Didn't get one last year. When you look at how the season ended up going for the Panthers this year, he gets it after week 3, after the non-con ends, right before a date with number 25 Youngstown State in the Unidome. So if you want to get your problems fixed, you want to get them fixed before conference season, and it looks like he's going to have the opportunity to do that. But he did say on Monday, like, hey, we need to get our errors ironed out. We need to get this figured out right now, because we can't just rely on the open date to be, once the time we finally get these figured out, we need to have this team ready to win right away. And that's something that we haven't been able to do through these first 2 weeks, obviously, because we haven't won. And so he's not taking, the Friday travel day. He's not using that as an excuse. He's not going to let them say, hey, we didn't get a day of preparation, so how are we going to fix these errors? No, they need to get it figured out right now. And he knows that Idaho State, seeing on film what Weber State saw on film and maybe what Iowa State saw on film, which is, the offense is struggling to get in rhythm. We can take them out of rhythm with some exotic blitzes, and we can get Theo Day sped up in his progression and maybe force a turnover where he's not seeing the field as well. And then on defense, they're a good defense, but they have some – we have an ability to expose them. Iowa State didn't really necessarily have too many explosive plays on offense against UNI, but Weber State has the 77-yard bomb to open the game. They have a 38-yard pass play on 4th and 7 to set up a field goal to go into half. So that's the thing that Coach Farley's sitting there thinking about on Monday already is, hey, Idaho State's seeing this on the film, so we need to get this figured out, or we're going to go into a game against another winless opponent and maybe be in some trouble. And another part of that is that Idaho State has the number 5 passing attack in all of FCS right now, and they're not doing that against Division II teams. They're doing that against FBS teams. They had first 2 games of the year, San Diego State, Utah State. They lose by a combined 58 points. They lost to Utah State 78-28 last week.
Gave up 44 points in the second quarter. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're getting blown out. Maybe not so much against San Diego State where they only lose by 8, but they got blown out by Utah State, but they still put up some gaudy passing numbers. And Coach Farley's seeing an explosive passes given up by his defense last week, a failure to create turnovers. And he's like, hey, Idaho State might be 0-2, but it's their first home game. They're going to be hungry, and they know they have the ability to expose maybe some of the weaknesses that we've shown already. So that's going to make this Idaho State game really interesting, I think, and it makes it even more urgent for them to kind of iron them out, but not hit the panic button. It didn't really seem like it was panic mode already. I guess we can. I've already done it, but we can go ahead and shift gears into this Idaho State battle. It's going to be in Pocatello, 5 p.m. Central, on ESPN Plus, also available on the Panther Sports Network on radio. This is the 4th all-time meeting against Idaho State. Panthers own the series 3-0. You were in attendance for the last meeting in 2019 in the Unidome. You and I won 13-6, and you had quite the superlative to describe this game. So go ahead and just talk about what you saw the last time these two teams met up.
Why, I couldn't describe it as a slobber knocker. I can tell you that much, because it was not. It was 2 teams that struggled mightily on that day. And boy, if I had been a paying fan, I might have wanted a partial refund because there was 0 offense in the game. You and I played excellent defense. They had 3 interceptions and they had 5 sacks in that game. Held Idaho State to just less than 210 yards. But, you and I trailed at half. Their offense had similar struggles. They only had 12 first downs. They only passed for 134 yards, and they rushed for a little over 100. It was a mighty struggle to move the ball all day long for both teams. It was odd because, it was one of those games, too, where it looked like it was a game that you and I needed to use as a momentum game, and they just and it wasn't. And, Idaho State was playing a backup quarterback, and I think you and I had to feel fortunate. They scored all 10 points in the second half and came out with a 13-6 win, but it was not pretty. I think in the story, even Coach Farley said it was ugly, but it's a win. It was ugly, but it was a win.
And I think looking at this game, can the Panthers win ugly and feel good about it coming out of it, given the first 2 games of the season?
I think you can go win. If you go win an ugly, you're going to feel better about yourself because you're going into that bye week and you can have 2 weeks to prepare for that home Valley opener. So I think winning, it would be nice to go have a bunch of style points this week, and they could win that way. But I think what they got to look is, hey, we got to go get a win no matter what, and what's going to best prepare us to get that win, so we have something that can feel good going into this bye week. They're probably going to get Sunday, Monday off, and then they get added on Tuesday. I think it doesn't matter how you win it. I think that you and I needs a win this week. They have to go get a win because they need something to build on during that off week. And then, okay, we've got this win. We know now we're going to come back. We've figured out the offensive line. Now Theo's cooking, and now there's some things on defense that I'm sure Coach Jeremiah Johnson wants to fix, and they're going to get those things shored up, and then okay, let's bring on Youngstown State and let's get that Valley season started right.
Yeah, looking at Idaho State, you can look at them and be like, well, they only gave up 85 passing yards to San Diego State in week 1, and then they gave up plenty to Utah State last week. And you can say, well, maybe the secondary is going to be capable of stopping UNI in their struggling passing attack. Well, I don't think that's quite the case. I don't think San Diego State only passed for 85 yards because of anything that Idaho State was doing. I think it had more to do with the fact that San Diego State and Utah State got whatever they wanted on the ground, because Idaho State currently has the worst rush defense in the country. They're giving up Let's see, what's the number here? 342 rushing yards per game. And so you're looking at what you saw out of Ty Edwards against Iowa State, and then he maybe struggled a little bit against Weber State, and then they got into a negative game script, maybe couldn't ride him as much as they wanted to. The fumble certainly, maybe shook confidence a little bit. I did notice he wasn't in the game the next drive, so maybe getting back into the good graces of his coaches this week, working on holding on to that ball a little bit more in practice. But you're looking at what he did against Iowa State, putting up about just over 4 yards per carry, and you're like, hey, maybe this could be finally the game where we see what this guy can really do. And he can finally break out and have that game that gets, the offense momentum, gets them in rhythm, and then gets him some rhythm as well. Because I think one of the things that's been missing is just that complementary play on the offense. Complementary football has been something that the Panthers have struggled with in both of these games, just from a general offense-defense sense and special teams. It's just been all three phases have never seemed to line up at the same time. Defense is playing well. The offense goes out and turns over the ball, and then the defense plays well again. Offense has a touchdown drive. Defense gives up a big play. It's just been they just can't help each other out. I think this is the game where you kind of start figuring that out. And I think if you look at it from an offense perspective, you can get Ty Edwards going a little bit, and then maybe you can get Theoday some time. Maybe he's not going to get dropped 5 times per game. I doubt you're going to give up. I would hope you wouldn't give up 5 sacks to Idaho State, I should say. And so I think that this is going to be a game where they can get some confidence and find some of that rhythm to play complementary football on offense, and then that's going to lead to complementary football on defense. One thing that Coach Farley wants to see as well is the Panthers force turnovers. He hasn't seen the defense force enough turnovers, make enough momentum-shifting plays. I could argue that coming up with a stand, forcing a 3-and-out field goal after a muffed punt with 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter trailing, that's a momentum-turning play. It didn't end up being one, but I think you should give the defense flowers for some of the stops they ended up making in that game. But that's another thing you're looking to do against Idaho State. You can get both of these quarterbacks have combined for five turnovers, 5 interceptions. Idaho State's running a 2-quarterback system. They have a true freshman in Jordan Cook and a junior in Hunter Hayes, not the country singer. I knew not the country singer. His name's Hunter Hayes, no E on Hayes. But they're not taking care of the football very well in these first 2 games. And so I think you can maybe prey on this offense a little bit. The running game has put up 123 yards total, so this offense is fairly anemic. You made a pedestrian offense look great last week. Come back, make a pedestrian offense look pedestrian this week. I think those are the goals for you. Run the ball well, get in rhythm, and then make those turnovers, make those momentum-turning plays. If you were looking at a Jim, what would you want to see if you were Coach Farley out of this game?
I think, it's going to go against every ounce of Coach Reeder's or Bodie Reeder's being, but I think it's got to be a run-heavy game plan. I think it's got to be like a 65% run, especially if you just look and see what Idaho State has given up in the last 2 weeks. And we talked about this when we were special guest on Colbert's radio show the other day. Let's get the offensive line some credit. And it's probably a little easier to pass block. So let's get downhill. Let's get Ty Edwards, let's get Harrison Baybouy going, and let's get those guys. Let's unleash them. Let's see a 200+ yard rush game. And then if you have I fully believe they have a 200 yard plus rush game, they're going to pass for over 200 yards too, and there's probably going to be a couple scores in there. So I think it's got to be a heavy rush attack. And I know that goes kind of against their guys' Bodie Reeder's kind of mindset there, but I think that's where they got to go. They got to get that going because I think they know when they get that pass block down that they can pass the ball.
I'm gonna protect my guy Bodie Reeder. I put the picture of him with the mullet in the paper like 2 weeks ago, so I'm gonna do him a favor here and defend him a little bit because I'm sure he's getting razzed plenty by his guys for that picture. But you say it's going to go against every ounce of his being, and we certainly haven't seen him go to the ground game much this year. But that's because UNI is constantly trailing. If you ran the numbers, I'm sure looking at possession numbers and time behind, it would be like a 60-40 split. 40% of the time they're not trailing, but 60% of the time this season they have been trailing. They just get behind in these games, and then it's just a constant battle to get back tied or in front. And so I think that the run game is a glorious thing to strive for, but they've been in a negative game script. so much this year that it hasn't been a luxury that they've been able to afford this year. So I love where you're at with the run game, but it just hasn't been an option to them this year.
And don't get me wrong. I believe on maybe the first 3 possessions of you and I'd have to go back and look, but multiple possessions that you and I ran on first and second down against Weber State. So he hasn't abandoned the run game. I'm saying let's unleash the run game, because based on what Idaho State's had happened to them in the first 2 weeks. They're not only the worst rush defense in the country, they're giving up teams are averaging 9 yards a carry. That's like 2 carry. That's incredible. So that's what I'm looking at is, let's get after, let's get downhill. I think that's what they need to maybe build some confidence, because I think the pass game's there. The explosive pass game's going to be there. They had some explosive pass plays, and that's another number. I think they had at least 5 pass plays of 20 yards or more in that game against Weber State. So I would call them an explosive play. So I think, those are there. Those are there. Let's unleash that. I think for me, getting that ground game going is offensive line, this is your day to shine. Let's get after it. You guys have been taking all this criticism from those guys that doing these podcasts and saying you need to move you around and they got to find their identity and they got to pass block better. Let's get nasty and let's run the ball. That's what I'm saying. Let's get nasty. Let's turn them loose. Let's get some Trevor Penning and all 5 of those guys and just get after it.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the run game and needing to find that, and it's easier to run block than pass block. And, I think most offensive linemen would tell you that they prefer to run block over pass block. And Bodie Reeder's offense is 100% built off of a complementary run game to pass game. He's got his little saying, run for yards, throw for miles, meaning we need to run to the point where we can set up the pass. And I think that's been one of the reasons why you've seen the offense struggle as much as it has, because it hasn't had, as I mentioned, the luxury to run the ball to set up the pass. They've been just passing because they have to. And so you get Iowa State that can drop a bunch of guys back in coverage, use that super veteran secondary that includes a sophomore and a guy like Jeremiah Cooper. You can read an excellent story from Nate Thomas in the Courier coming up, our Mason City Globe-Gazette writer. You can read a great story about him, but these secondaries have been able to drop as many guys as they want back because UNI has been passing the ball and has had to pass the ball. And so getting back to a complementary game will, like you said, likely lead to an explosive day for the ground game and for the pass game. And I have felt like we haven't gotten what we've been told about, which is in the run game, we've been told about this 3-headed monster that they have at running back in Bay Bowie, Edwards, and Josh Jenkins. And we've seen all 3 of those guys, but we haven't gotten to see them do what we were promised they were going to be able to do, and that's be game breakers, be this exceptional. They all do one thing really well, and they can do everything as well. And I just don't feel like we've seen any of them at their max, capacity. I'd love to see that, and that's what I'm hoping to see against Idaho State, because I feel like once you get into Valley play, that's going to be a super beneficial thing to have is a dominant ground game.
Yeah, for sure. I think that and turn a little bit. I'm sure you're going to transition here, but I'm going to take over the host here a little bit.
Go ahead.
But yeah, that's what we're going to see, and then you brought up the offensive numbers of Idaho State in their pass game, so. Without having seen a lot of Idaho State film, which I'm sure you're the guy, you've probably already watched them play, and not been to a single UNI practice week. Based on my knowledge from past, I'm guessing you're going to see a lot of 3 safety look. They're going to work at it. They're going to play 5 defensive backs. That means they kind of play that way already with Edwin Dearman being that whatever you want to call that position. Iowa calls it cash, I think. So I think you're going to see a lot more. I think you're going to see 3 safeties across the top. That's an Iowa State look, I think, and Iowa State plays a lot of 3 deep safety. So I think you're going to see a lot of that Iowa. That means probably a little less of Josiah Galvin because they're going to bring in an extra safety. But, I don't know if they're looking. I just know when they've had to play, when they face a pass-heavy team, we're going to see a lot more of that, and they work on that, and that's in their repertoire. So, and I could be totally wrong. Jim knows nothing. That should be the title of our show. Maybe we should do another podcast. Jim knows nothing.
Or we could just do a segment each week where you try and predict what's going to happen. And
yeah. And that would be a great segment. Jim knows nothing. So, coaches, if you're listening out there, Jim knows nothing, and he's admitting that right now. But I have a feeling that's how the defense is going to play. And then they're going to hope, guys like Christian Boyd up the middle, and then get some of those defensive ends going. Devin Rice, get after the quarterback, get a couple sacks. I don't think they have a sack yet? Or
No, they have 0 sacks on the season.
So yeah. So let's get that. Let's unleash the pass. Oh, we need to unleash the run game. Let's unleash the pass rush. Let's get a sack.
Well, I mean, it's easy to say this because I don't think we've seen them look fantastic at any point this season. Maybe when Sergio was going off for like 90 yards in the first quarter against Weber State. This is the closest we've been. But we were told about how great the running back room was. We were told about how great the defensive line was. And we were told about how great the offense was going to be. And I don't think we've seen any of those three things happen just yet. The run defense has been pretty good. I mean, it fell apart a little bit late in the game against Weber State. Once Damon Bankston gets like a 56-yard touchdown run right at the end to make it a 17-point game, I think it was. But outside of that, I think the run defense has been pretty good. So maybe we've seen the defensive line be a strength there. But outside of that, we're still waiting to see what we were promised coming into the year. And so I think that's what it is. I guess we're all like looking for Idaho State to offer us is the chance to see those strengths. And that's what I'll be looking for when I'm in Holt Arena this weekend on Saturday. You can follow me on Twitter at Ethan_Petrik. I'll be in Pocatello for that game, giving you all the updates possible. Special thanks to you and I for letting me on the team plane. Not gonna color the coverage towards them at all, though. Still gonna be offering that unbiased take because I am not from Iowa originally, so I'm not a biased reporter like probably Jim is as a UNI alum.
No, and just one thing. So we talked about the defensive line doesn't have any sacks, but look, this is our thing. I think Ben Belkin and Ty Langenberg have been excellent at linebacker, and the indication of that is the defensive line's doing their job up front and helping them make plays in the run game. So I think you got to give credit a little bit to the defensive line where, maybe they don't have a sack yet, but those linebackers who were really, that was a question. I think that was a question mark on the defense a little bit coming in. After a series of graduations that have, taken away some stellar players, I think you got to give the D-line a little credit because I know the linebackers will be giving them credit for helping them make plays. So they're eating up their blocks, and the linebackers are getting after it, and making leading the team in tackles, and they haven't been glaring weaknesses. So with that, I'm hoping Ethan has picked out where he's going to go out to eat in Pocatello. I keep on wanting to say in Moscow, but that's the other school.
I wish I was going to the Kibbe Dome. The Kibbe Dome has quite the cult following, and so I might be from Montana, but I'm from the wrong side of Montana to be making trips to Idaho. So I've not ever been to the Kibbe Dome. I wish it was at the Kibbe Dome, but I'm sure Holt Arena will be quite the venue as well. I'm excited to be back in mountain country, a little bit more familiar to me than Iowa is, but I love Iowa now anyway. So also I've been really wanting to start a mailbag on this show where you guys ask us some questions. So if you have any questions about UNI, go ahead and drop in the comments. You can email me at ethan.petrik@wcfcourier.com, Jim at jim.nelson@wcfcourier.com. You can see how those names are spelled right on the screen for our radio audience. Just find it on the website. I'm not going to spell it out for you. But email us your questions. I'd love to answer those. Maybe I could answer them in the print edition as well. Jim can answer them as well, as he's got significantly more institutional knowledge than I do. And also keep your lookout for Jim Knows Nothing, because I think I am going to make him do that each week.
I got a point to that. I think maybe our last 2 minutes I get like a Jim's 90 seconds and Jim's an idiot or something like that. Or Jim's an idiot because he just likes to talk a lot. So or something, yeah. But I think Jim Knows Nothing is going to be the title of the segment. But I think totally I'm on board because I like just to talk into this microphone, and sometimes I just talk gibberish.
All right, we'll be back in the week, but keep your eye on the WCF Courier, the Waterloo-Cedar Falls Courier, for your Panther content coming forward. Thank you for watching.